What if you could help write the story? This is the Brew Ink Podcast. All right, well, welcome to, what episode is this? Is this 14?
14!
Episode 14 of the Brew Ink Podcast. And as some of you may have noticed, we have started to introduce some different episodes. We will start doing some interviews. If you listen to episode 13, we're going to have Nick Stone's interview coming up. I've got an interview with my agent coming up, Kyle Young. And we're going to try to do some more interviews, kind of interspersed between, the 2 weeks that we give ourselves to vote and write.
And they will be titled Interbrews.
Interbrew. So, welcome, and we've got a great episode for you tonight, and I've got everybody here. We've got all 6 of us here, so we've got Sarah, say hey.
Hey.
We've got Steven.
I'm here.
We've got Katie,
Hello,
the dinosaur lady, and we've got Bill.
Howdy, howdy.
And we've got Evie, our writer for tonight. And I'm Britt, and our topic for tonight is what makes a good ending? What makes a good ending of a story? So as writers, one of the reasons we want to write is, and we've already had this discussion, is other novels, other books, other stories have inspired us. And so that makes us want to have the same sort of impact on other people, right? And one of the things that makes a huge impact on people is a satisfying ending, at least to me. Like when you get to the end, you can really ruin a movie and a story with the wrong ending, in my opinion. And so, and as we're trying to wrap up, and we just had a big discussion on our own story for Boneyard, as we're trying to wrap up Boneyard, and we're trying to think, well, what's going to make a satisfying ending? What's going to get to that point where we get to a satisfying ending? And so I just thought we could talk about that tonight. And so I'm just going to kind of go around and ask. And by the way, we probably should have called this episode spoiler alert episodes. So Katie, can you think of something like what would make a good satisfying ending for you? What are some things and maybe an example?
I really like endings that give me something to think about, that give me a moment of pause at the end. For example, Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. The main conflict has ended with the total genocide, the xenocide of the buggers. And as Ender's exploring the world that he knew from his dreams, he comes across the Queen's message to him. And the ending balances Ender's guilt with this forgiveness. It really wraps up that story. It's a balm, but it's not a happy ending. But it resolves the main character's inner conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is Julie of the Wolves by Jean Craighead George. And it's a children's novel. I read it first, I think, when I was like 12. And it was one of the very first books where it wasn't a happy ending. It was a very solemn thing. Because at the end of the book, Julie, who started the book leaving her village, her Inuit village, she's running away from a marriage where she was a child bride, and she goes to live with, she ends up living with a pack of wolves. And at the end, her main wolf companion has died, or one of the wolf companions has died. And it's just at the end, she realizes that she can't stay in the tundra and goes back to the village that she had fled from, having learned stuff and become not a new person, but she's completed a character journey that enables her to go back to those wounds and to deal with the issues there.
Yeah, I agree. Ender's Game to me is one of the reasons the book keeps being read and recycled through, because the ending is so powerful.
Yeah.
And it's such a great testimony to him as a writer that he could come up with something, and it totally sends the whole rest of the series in a different direction in such a great way. If you guys have not read the rest of the series, it's totally different because of that, because of that experience at the end. What about you, Stephen? Do you have anything?
So I've got 2 different things that I like about an ending, and The one that I'm going to just mention quickly is an ending that leaves it up to the interpretation of the audience. Mm-hmm. So, like, a good example would be...
Inception.
That's exactly what I was... Yeah. Inception, where it like, hints at what's happening, but it doesn't quite give you that resolve. And so then you're left going, well, what do you think? Mm-hmm. And so I love that when something is displayed out well enough that it could be either or. Mm-hmm. And then they don't give you that. But the other type of ending that I really like is really good is when it brings you back to the beginning of the story. Like, where were we established? What was kind of like our initial goal or our initial desire? And does it come back around to that? Yeah. Does it show, this is where we came from and this is where we're at now? Or does it show this is our original goal and we've gone through all of this and now we're able to finally get back here to rest? And so my example for that would be The Lord of the Rings with The Return of the King. And this is kind of like the climactic ending, but I love how Tolkien just starts playing with the meta of the whole thing. Like, where they're talking about, what if we were characters in a story? Mm-hmm. Would we be the heroes? Mm-hmm. And then Frodo's like, Sam. What about Sam? I want to hear more about Sam. And so I love that part. It's not quite the ending, but I love that. And then the ending of when they do come back, the hobbits come back into Hobbiton as these new, like, bigger, they're like regal, they've got armor, they're on horses, and they come in with all these like spoils from their journey. And it shows the juxtaposition of how they left from Hobbiton and kind of how they came back, and the people that were kind of like trying to keep them, underfoot or trying to kind of, win one over on them. Like, they were able to just easily like, no, I've been through a lot. And I'm not going to be outdone by some simpletons now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just as writers, we all need to understand that we've talked about this with our own stories, like, what is the character's goal in the beginning? Right. And then how is that resolved at the end? Because whenever that's resolved, that's the end of the story. Yeah. Now, it can be resolved in all kind of different ways. They can not achieve it, they can achieve it, but it actually be worse for them. Like, there's a lot of different ways to end it that's a very satisfying thing. And I think having an ending where you don't know, like, you have to interpret it for yourself, is very difficult to do in a satisfying way.
Exactly.
Like,
without disappointing the audience.
But you're right, Inception does a great job.
See, to me, Inception made me mad. It made me so angry that they wouldn't just tell me what happens. Like, I don't need this guessing crap. Like, just give it to me. Yeah. So, like, those books drive me crazy.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, what do you think?
So, I was thinking of two things. First of all, I like books that I can relate to, that have some element of the human condition. So, not fantasy, really big Avenger movies, that kind of thing. Like, I can identify in a way, but it's kind of like, oh, that was a nice story. But endings that hit me to my core, and that surprised me. I like to be surprised. It doesn't always have to be a shocking twist, but just, oh my God, I did not see that coming. So Sweeney Todd, the movie, which I guess was a stage play, which I had never seen. And I literally did not know that was going to happen at the end. I was so shocked. I was just like, like a full-on audible gasp, right? So that was great. And then one of my favorite books of all time is The Great Gatsby. Oh, yeah. And first of all, the last lines are like epic, right? I mean, people like memorize them, have them tattooed on their bodies. But the reason that the end of that novel is so poignant to me is because what F. Scott Fitzgerald does very well is he has an overarching picture that it doesn't tie up nicely at the end, but just like his characters go through transformation in the story, the overall message also transforms. Does that make sense? So Jay Gatsby represents things about America that he was intending to say, and the story is a metaphor for the way that this industrial revolution had just corrupted people, and what made them such unique and interesting characters was that big thing that the book was about affected them like a rainstorm. I mean, and so like, you know, when the end comes, spoiler alert, and people are dead, and not Gatsby, but the guy that is his friend, I can't remember his name.
Nick Carraway.
Thank you. The main character. He's basically sitting there like looking out over this bay or whatever, and everything's just gone. Everything's dust, you know, all the fancy, all the lights, all the...
It's kind of back to normal.
Yeah, but it's even worse. Because now he has this thing that's happened that he can't unfeel. And how many of us know what that's like? You know, there's this thing here, it says, all in all, the novel is a vision of a deeply unbalanced and unfair world. And how true is that, right? So for me, literature is not just a reflection of my life, because that's boring. I can look in the mirror for that. But it's like an exponential reflection on life. Not just my life, but the lives that we live.
Yeah.
That was just a book that I've read several times and that I just loved, and it does an ending very well, but it's not a big bang.
Right.
It's a subtle fading off.
Yeah, and that can be very satisfying if it's a satisfying conclusion to that, whatever that theme is and whatever that kind of story is. I think for me, I like endings. I like all kind of different endings, but the kind of ones that I'm kind of thinking about are, I like endings where the character takes a huge step forward. Like, I like the kind of stories where they I guess it's like the hero's journey. Like, but even if it's a true story about some guy who's poor and he starts a business and he's got to struggle through it and then he like succeeds, or like even those kind of stories where they start at a point where they just seem normal, but they have to struggle and they become something else. And that can happen in superheroes and fantasy. I mean, it can happen in all kind of different stories, but I really like that a character by their own action and intentionality becomes something better and becomes something bigger or worse for that matter. I mean, like but it's such a huge change from who they were before that this story has significantly changed them, because that's been a lot of my experience. I've been through a lot of painful things, awesome things, and they've all changed me as a person. I'm totally different than I was 20 years ago. But I also really like the kind of endings where at the end, whatever comes out makes you rethink and changes the whole story. For instance, Kaiser Soze, right? Like, just in that movie, the Usual Suspects.
That was a good one.
At the end, there's a revelation, and you go, now it all like, and it's it's a kind of almost confusing movie, but it's so well done, it's so well acted and written, and then at the end you get to, another book that does it that I really liked was Brandon Sanderson and Mistborn.
Yeah.
Like, there's at the end of one of the books, like, he reveals something and you go, that just changes like everything that just happened.
Yeah.
And it makes me see the whole book that I just spent. And then with a book, it's hours, right, of reading and getting into the characters. And you think this guy's the hero, and this guy, and then he reveals something. But you got to be careful, because it can't just be a cheap twist.
Right.
It's got to be something that you go, like, he's been giving hints the whole time, you just didn't see him.
The Illusionist.
Yeah.
Was a movie that did it very well.
Yeah. So I like those kind of movies. And I mean, I love the ending of, I even like sad endings. I love the ending of Rogue One. I'm so glad they fought for that ending. Like, so if you don't know, at the end of Rogue One, most people have seen it, but Disney said, no, you can't do that. This is a Disney Star Wars movie. You can't,
they're like, no, this is
kill everybody off, and they fought for it.
Yeah, they're like, this is how it has to end.
And I'm so glad it has become, if not, it's probably not my favorite Star Wars movie, but it's up there because of that sort of thing.
I was going to say, I think that you're right, but it has to be well placed and it has to be well paced.
Yeah.
Because there are times when something big gets revealed. If it's not
last.
done well, you're just like, what? That feels weird.
Yeah.
Or it just, there's like this big buildup, and then nothing happens, or there's this thing that you think should have probably been built up and it just isn't. So that's an art in and of itself to place and pace that so that it gives the effect that you want it to give.
And I think that's why I like it, because as a writer, I'm jealous.
Right.
I'm like, oh my God, he was doing this the whole time and I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
Because as a writer,
That's
If
how
it flies
Sweeney
under your
Todd was
radar.
for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so what do you think, Evie?
Again, those books actually drive me crazy, so. I actually read the ending first so that I don't get surprised because I hate it.
That's what my wife
That's
does.
me.
I love it.
That's what happened to me. Anyway, one book that doesn't end surprisingly, in fact, ends exactly the way it should, is The Last Battle, which is the last book in Narnia. That's one of my favorite endings because I like the endings that when you're done with the book, you stop and you think, this has impacted my life and I want to move forward the same way that they move forward. Those are the kind of books I like. They impact not just like, oh, that was fun and that was nice and oh, how would that kind of impact? Like it leaves a like crater that you're like, all right, this is time to fill.
You get that pause and reflect moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, we in our family love Narnia anyway, but we quote all the time, further up, further in. And that's the end of that book. And it's a drive to always look for the most, the most beautiful thing that you can imagine is still nothing compared to what God has for us. And so, those kind of books where I just stop and go, this is going to be cool. Because now it's a call to adventure. I love books that end with a call to adventure of your own.
Yeah.
The Narnia book that did that for me was Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Yeah.
The movie, the book, every time I cry. Just that moment where the little mouse and oh my God, I'm gonna cry right now thinking about it. Like it's that, like you're right, but it's that moment of that completion, that that dream, and I mean it's great.
It's interesting that you say that because when I bring up Narnia, men, and usually not women, men keep bringing up that same exact point because it's a call to their heart.
It is a call to their heart.
I was going to say it would be so funny because The Silver Chair is my favorite Narnia book. And that says so much about my personality.
Those are all books. I think all the Narnia books are similar in the sense that all the books speak to you personally, so personally that it calls you to an adventure. At the end of The Silver Chair, someone like you would hear the call.
And it's this decision that he's stuck with it. And it feels so, it's like neither one, but you don't know, but you have to do something. And there's this you have to go forward in uncertainty and just trust, right?
And that's so like you.
Yeah, because I suck at that.
Whereas, you can see how Last Battle is all about big, giant decisions and finding the adventure, which obviously
You love.
I love.
So, Bill, you said save you for last, and here you go. What you got?
It wasn't really that hard. It took me a couple of minutes to think about it. A little slow today. Again, two things that I really, really like with the ending of a story. And I'm not going to say a movie or a book. I'm going to say a story. Because the first one is I love redemption stories. And what brought that to mind was Catch Me If You Can, the movie. More than the movie, I watched Google Talk with Frank Abagnale, the subject of the movie, this last week, where he talked about his real life and what really was involved and what the real story was. The movie was a fictionalized account of his life, although many of the things that he did in that movie really happened. But the redemption was that at the end of a criminal career where he started as a 16-year-old child, he was redeemed.
Yeah.
He was offered the opportunity to go to work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Yep.
And at this point spent 42 years working for the FBI. His sons are both very much active in the community. One of them is a teacher in Asia, and another one is an FBI agent who's on one of the FBI's premier hostage rescue teams, I believe, from the way I understand it. I think he's unable to really say that, but when he gives enough details, you're
Right.
like, oh yeah, okay, that guy's a super badass. Okay, so I mean, these guys are something else. So that redemption story idea, I love that in any story, and to hear his real story, his true story, is even more biting and more real. Of course, it's more real, but I mean, it hits you harder than the movie did. Even though the movie was good, the real story is about who he was and who he became, and how he was ashamed.
And how, after being caught, he was given an opportunity
to make
redeem.
good on that,
Yeah.
and he took that opportunity.
Yeah.
He took that opportunity. He did well with it. The second one is a crossroads story. I like an ending where it's very much a European-style story in some ways when it comes to movies. But I like a lot of endings where somebody comes to the end and you know that a character has a choice to make. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to decide whether he's good or bad. You just know that now they have a choice to make. And one of my favorites of those was in Castaway.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Because in Castaway, I mean, that movie just drug on and on and on. But finally, he and Wilson got off the island, and he's there. He's delivered this package, and he stands in the middle of the crossroads, and he looks each direction. And in the end, the last scene, a lot of people have taken away with that. He looked in the direction that he'd just come from, the farmhouse where the woman lived. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but in the opening scene, there was a gate up there in the Dick and somebody's place. Okay, it was her husband's name. In the end, his name was broken out of that gate. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't notice that. But,
Then
okay.
and if you see that, you see now she's single. Okay, and so he looks in that direction. There's that possibility, but there's 3 other directions he could go.
Right.
And she's given him this list. This woman that stopped. If you watch the movie,
Mm-hmm.
she gives him this list of, hey, if you go this way, there's 1,000 miles, and then you're in Canada. If you go this way, there's a couple hundred miles of farms, and whatever. She gives that list, but he has a choice to make, and the world is wide open to him.
Right.
Yeah.
He's able to go whichever way, but it's left up to the audience to
It's
kinda
left
go.
up to the audience to figure out
way.
where he's going to go
But-
and what he's going to do next.
But again, that's a satisfying ending because
It's freedom.
It completes his journey.
It completes
Yeah.
his journey to freedom. He's not
right?
on this little
not
rock
on
that
the
was his
iris,
prison
so, yeah.
cell for years. Yeah. For 4 years, he was in a prison cell on a little rock in the middle of the ocean. And now he's free to make that choice.
And all the struggles he had to get free, and all the struggles, and it is a satisfying ending. I agree. It was a very satisfying ending. All right, so that's our discussion for this episode on what makes a good ending. Hopefully we didn't spoil some. We kept it to some pretty major things. If you haven't read The Great Gatsby or seen some of these movies, you've been under a rock, in my opinion.
You're a little behind.
You're a little behind, but
This is not the ending of this episode.
that's
though.
not the ending of this episode.
Nice job,
There you go.
Real nice
We're going to
job.
transition into Evie, who has written our episode 14. So here we go.
that had her dick and whatever.
Boneyard, episode 14. Eamon huffed. Well, this is a hurdle I didn't anticipate. Now what, I said. She's blocking the road back to the others. Eamon swept the trash from his bike. I'm sure Doc and the others can see Maria's helicopter from the barn. Either they'll come to us, or make a way for us to come to them. One way or the other, we're all in this together. A loud boom echoed in the distance. We looked to the sky and watched as Maria took off, flying down the dirt path towards the barn, in the direction of the noise. Eamon's toothy grin was infectious. Looks like we're going to them, he said, straddling his bike. You coming? I climbed on behind him and held tight to his waist. The bike roared to life. We darted through the town too fast to take in the glares of the white folks witnessing our loud exit. The dirt kicked up wildly under the bike's tires, leaving a thick trail of red dust, hopefully unnoticed by Maria in the sky above. She hadn't noticed us. They got her, I yelled over the roar of the engine, while pointing up ahead. Maria was busy attempting a safe landing with the smoking helicopter. Walt, Troy, and Doc had repositioned the tank in front of the barn and opened fire. She was whirling erratically through the air, twizzling down like a spiral motion of a sycamore seed. Eamon swung the bike with great force around the side of the tank. Get off, he snapped, his tone full of vile fury. I did as I was told. Troy and Walt leaped down from the tank. Boy, are we glad to see you guys, piped Walt as he gave me a tight hug. Troy, on the other hand, had his eyes fixed on Eamon. I followed his gaze to the vein pulsing in Eamon's neck. Eamon's knuckles tightened around the handlebars. He kicked off the ground and sped toward the crashing helicopter. Doc leaped from the tank and raced after Eamon. The three of us stood watching in shock. For a middle-aged man, he was really hauling. Doc screamed at the top of his lungs. "Eamon, no! Stop!" He shrieked a bone-chilling cry. "You promised you wouldn't hurt her! You promised, Eamon! Stop!" The guttural wails were of deep pain and angst and panic. Troy and Walt and I exchanged fearful looks, then burst forward in pursuit through the cloud of red dust after Doc and Eamon. Eamon made a calculated leap towards the helicopter. The motorcycle rushed out from under his airborne body and slid dangerously across the hot ground towards Doc. Doc hurled himself into the air in the nick of time, clearing the spinning tire. He landed awkwardly in a heap in the dirt, shaken and hurt. Eamon latched onto the helicopter's hatch and ripped it from its hinges. He reached inside and withdrew Maria by her neck. His power was alarming, his anger petrifying, and his actions hideous. "Eamon!" I yelled as I rushed past Doc. He reeled around to face me. Fear struck, I slid to a halt a few feet from him. He stared at me, his shades on the ground, his bright green eyes glowing like the stones. Not until this moment had it occurred to me that I was so used to seeing Eamon in his shades that in my mind, they were part of him. He stood holding Maria up in the air as she slowly suffocated, her body regenerating over and over as the stone around her neck attempted to heal her faster than she was dying. "I am the guardian of the stones, and their protector," he growled. He reached up and ripped the stone pendant from her neck. Her face reddened as she clawed at his hand, desperate for air. A rush of pink-colored skin threw me off my feet as Doc leaped onto Eamon. "No! You promised!" Eamon was too strong. He flung Doc to the ground with his free arm. "You fool! Dr. Cornelius, you are a man of science and fact. How is it you are so blind to the irrationality of your own emotions?" Doc sobbed like a wounded child, whimpering under his breath. "You promised. Can't you see she's using you? Desperate people do desperate things. Your studies prove the rocks weren't just a myth. Dr. Cornelius, she does not love you. She conned you out of your life's work because she is simply afraid of dying." Doc lifted his bloodshot eyes to Eamon and pleaded once more. "You promised." In a one-arm motion, he tossed Maria at Doc's feet. She gasped for air, panting like a dog desperate for water. "Take her." You can't just... She needs a stone." "I took pity when you came to me. I gave you what I had to offer, but you wanted more." "She will die." "All of humanity is dying. Some sooner than others."
Let's snap it in.
All right, good job, Evie. Good job, Evie.
All right, so Evie, give us options. We've already talked about the options. Let's go ahead and just knock them out. What are they?
Yep, here are three options. Option number 1, Deb defends Maria. Option number 2, Doc kills Maria. Option number 3, Walt opens fire with the tank machine gun.
All right, so we're at the end of this place in the situation. So either Deb is going to try to defend Maria somehow, or Doc is some twist or turn is going to happen, and then he's going to end up killing Maria for some reason we don't know yet.
It sounds like Eamon maybe gets through to him.
Something. Who knows?
Or he's
that's up to the next
mercy
writer.
killing.
Yeah.
And
She's dying anyway.
The third option is we decided to try to give Walt something active to do, even if it's to just create chaos.
Flip his lid.
So,
Yes.
Haven't seen it yet. I want to see it.
so
Walt wants attention.
So go to www.brewinink.com and vote, listen, share, rate, subscribe, do whatever you feel like doing to support us. We would greatly appreciate it. And vote. And until then, what do we say, guys? We're going to raise a glass to
Inspiration.
Yay.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Well done, everyone.
The only people.
done.
He shrieked as a... Nope. Dang it.
I like your little...
Nope.
Yeah, I remember that from the last time editing. Nope.
Sorry. The guttural wails were deep. Nope. Nope. Still, that sounds weird, doesn't it? Troy, Walt, and I exchanged fear. Nope. And lashed onto the helicopter. Nope. In a one-armed motion. Nope. Dang it. I don't even realize now I know I say it. Dang it.
I think it's cute.
Okay. Nope.
I think you're like, now you're like thinking about it.
Nope.